There we go. Okay. Not so sunny Shropshire. Well, I am in not so sunny Leeds. So, Heather, I feel your pain. I'm sure it's not as sunny as Malta. Right. Let me get started. So, let me share my screen. Share screen. And then if somebody can give me a thumbs up to let me know that you can see it, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much. It's always a bit daunting when you're driving by yourself. So thanks for your support. Right, brilliant. So hopefully you're all here to for the webinar on building a culture of trust and empowerment, strategies to reduce micromanagement and unleash team potential. If that's not the webinar you were looking for, feel free to leave. If not, then you're very welcome here. So we'll crack on. That's just my little reminder to record if I haven't already done it. This time I have done it, so we're fine. So a quick introduction to myself. I've been in HR for over 25 years for my sins, and I've followed mostly agile HR practices and methodologies for many of those years, mostly because I was fed up with how long it took for HR to have an impact, add value, and be credible. And I found that this really helped during the initial COVID years. So my team were already, for example, set up to work remotely. My team were all over the UK. I was working for a big global HR and recruitment outplacement company. So we already had the practices and frameworks set up, and we were following principles like Scrum and Kanban, and we were working in 2-week sprints with backlogs. We were working transparently, and we were collaborating every day using digital tools. So when COVID hit, we were a little bit ahead of the game. And that prompted me during COVID. I hit 40, the whole COVID existential crisis. What am I doing? What do I want out of life? And it led me to set up my own business to reimagine how HR gets done. So initially I was developing leaders in Agile in HR, which I've trademarked, and leading teams through transformations using those methods. So having worked with a lot of clients, I could see that they were facing similar problems, regardless of their size and industry, where they were struggling with leadership, and things like remote and hybrid work was really kind of bringing that out. And it was kind of a lot of them were facing a bit of a standoff between employees and senior leadership. So I started to research why this is, and that led me to build some products and build some services for businesses. So I'm an Agile leadership consultancy. I do a lot of leadership development. I'm a business change consultant, and I work with Agile, with an Agile project mindset. So where there's a focus on people-centered solutions and the result needs to be efficiency, employee engagement, productivity, or increased profit, then that's the space that I'm in. So let's have a look at why we're here today. So we're here to look at micromanagement. So who wants to know what a micromanager looks like? Are you ready? So this is what a micromanager looks like. It's me! And I'm wearing the same lipstick as I was during that. I've just noticed I'm in black as well, so I do wear other colours. So yeah, it's me. I was a micromanager. It was a long time ago. And I do think that micromanagers do sometimes get a bit of a bad rap, not sure what the word is. According to the CMI, 84% of managers don't get any kind of management training. And if they do, it tends to be the legislative kind that keeps businesses out of trouble. So it tends to be along the lines of, preventing unfair dismissal or wrongful dismissal, or the, racism, sexism, those kinds of things. Now, I was promoted because I was very good at what I did. And I was praised and rewarded quite regularly for my tenacity and my passion for getting things done. So to me, anyone that wasn't ferociously hardworking, 100% committed and achieving all of the time, and in my notes, I've got that in capital letters, they weren't trying hard enough. So at the time, I was a single mum and I relied very heavily on bonuses. And I was also very protective of my team, and I wanted them to get their bonuses. I wanted them to move on, and I wanted them to get promoted and enjoy what I had enjoyed. I was and still am very proud of the fact that I'm still in touch with a lot of the people that I've managed in the last 25 years, and they are thriving. They are chief people officers. They are, in senior management teams and what have you. So I didn't cause too much damage, but on reflection, I was a bit of a micromanager. I was that person that gave very detailed instructions because it'll be a lot faster if they do it the way that I did it, because we already know that it works, and it means that we can focus on other more interesting work. And I was also the person that wanted things to look right. So a report had to be presented well for it to be credible. I wanted updates regularly and for my team to be across everything. I was quite impatient, and I showed my support because I was very supportive, but I showed my support by rolling up my sleeves and helping out consistently. So if one of my team said to me, oh, I'm really struggling behind on this, or I want to do this, then my answer was that I would go and help them. And I would do that in quite a practical way. But I now realise, with the benefit of experience, that I was really kind of taking away an opportunity for them to learn or fail or be proud of doing something themselves and finding that solution themselves. So I was kind of taking things away from my team, which wasn't ideal. So the hidden costs of micromanagement. So I'd like to explore the negative impact of micromanagement on employee morale, engagement, and productivity, and how that happens. So we know that micromanagement stifles creativity, it reduces engagement, and it hinders productivity. So we're going to be looking at building a culture of trust and empowerment where employees feel valued, heard, and equipped to excel. So if you're in an environment where teams are maybe struggling with overwhelm or being burdened, or you've got managers that are complaining that they're having to do things for people all the time, or you're in an environment where it's difficult to gauge the progress of team members without getting lots and lots of reports and updates, if there's a lot of burnout, if conflicts aren't being addressed and resolved effectively, and you're seeing kind of micromanagement behaviours creeping in, then you're probably in an environment where micromanagement is prevalent. So what does it look like? I think sometimes the term kind of gets a bit misused. So micromanagement isn't when a manager is having to address underperformance. It's not a manager that has, high expectations in and of itself. It's not someone who's interested in what's happening and asks lots of questions. And it isn't someone that wants regular updates or who challenges data or results or gives feedback. Those are not, in and of themselves, they are not the behaviours of people that are micromanagers. Instead, the definition of micromanagement, it refers to excessive control or involvement in the minute details of tasks and processes. So it's things like monitoring and scrutinising employees' work unnecessarily. It's giving overly detailed instructions. I did that. It's being reluctant to delegate tasks. It's not feeling or showing trust in team members' abilities. It's having an insistence on following rigid procedures and frequently intervening in tasks without necessity. That's the kind of definition of micromanagement. So we're not here to talk about managing underperformance. That's something else. Instead, what we're talking about is the kind of behaviours that are stopping people from thriving. So let's have a think about understanding the micromanager. So I said before that there's been a rise in my accidental managers. So according to the CMI, 84% are accidental managers. And a good way of looking at it is that management isn't a promotion, it's actually a whole other job. And people don't always recognize that. They think because they're good at something, then they will then automatically be good at leading that something. Um, but that's not always the case, and often isn't the case. So if we look at the things that drive micromanagement, I'd love to know in the chat whether anybody has felt this. If you're being any of these, if you're feeling brave, let me know if you've felt any of these, or if you've witnessed it in businesses that you've worked in. Let me know in the chat. But there are very human reasons behind people being micromanagers. Having a fear of failure is often there, and that was something that I felt. I felt like I'd been promoted because I'd been really good at my job, and if I then failed, then that would be taken away from me. And as a single mum, that was something I worried about a lot. Having perfectionism, having that feeling of needing to be perfect because you are a role model and everybody's looking at you. You may have a lack of trust, and that could be because of your upbringing, for example, your childhood, or how you've been treated in previous companies. Sometimes there's a trauma response for that. And again, that's probably the same for things like control issues. Not wanting to let go because you know that if you're doing it yourself, you're guaranteed to get a good result. It can be very difficult to sort of pass that on to somebody when you know that perhaps they're not quite ready, and you think that they might fail, and how that might make them look, and how it might make you look. There also might be, burnout, that's kind of awful cycle of burnout where you're worried about burdening yourself with more things if people don't get it right. Perhaps you're looking down the tunnel at other things that are going to be coming in, and worried that if you don't get this right now, it's going to cause an impact later on down the line. And then those skills, which is often overlooked, where people just aren't getting, the leadership skills. They might be getting some management information, but they're not getting the leadership skills for people to thrive, whether that's remote working, hybrid, or on site. And that can then lead to that cycle. And you can kind of join that cycle at any point. But you can have, a manager loses trust or never has it in the first place. They then increase their control. The employee then gets annoyed and doesn't communicate, which then makes the micromanager lose trust even more. So it's a real kind of cycle that's quite difficult to break. And that's really that's really prevalent in sort of remote or hybrid teams where people aren't able to see each other all the time. And that can really have an impact on a manager's mental health. It can lead to increased stress and anxiety for the manager. Constantly monitoring and controlling can lead to burnout and exhaustion. And that kind of pressure to maintain control can create that fear of failure and perfectionism, and that can really impact on your mental well-being as well. So I wanted to kind of give that human side of micromanagement and ask you to bear that in mind. So I'd love for you to go in the chat now and do something called a chatter form. So I'm asking the question, how does how can micromanagement affect or impact remote and hybrid teams? So I'd like you to type a response, but don't click send until I say go. So I'm going to give you a minute, and I'd love to see what your thoughts are on how it can impact remote or hybrid teams, or how you're seeing it impact the teams that you're working with. So type it in the chat. It doesn't have to be War and Peace. Don't worry about spelling. I'm usually quite good at working out what people mean, but don't press send until I say go. And that means that we're going to see people sort of really honest insights. So I would love to see that. So how does micromanagement impact remote and hybrid teams that you're seeing, witnessing, or perhaps doing yourself? How is it impacting? So I'll just give another few seconds. You can have my earrings while I'm doing it. River Island special. Okay, thank you, Neelam. Okay, so I'm going to say go. So go, and then we'll see it come up in the chat. Brilliant, well done, everybody. So I used to work for a client manager who was controlling, and I was junior. Yeah, I think we've all been there. Demotivation to attend site, Neelam. Yeah, really insightful. Isolation, lack of collaboration. Yeah, do you know what? That's really interesting, Christina, actually, because that's another kind of form of micromanagement where, you know, people have this kind of perception that micromanagers are like always there. They're like hovering over somebody's shoulder or over somebody's virtual shoulder all the time. But actually, what can happen with remote and hybrid teams is that the manager completely ignores them, you know, for ages, out of sight, out of mind, and then might suddenly say, now I want a report. Now I want, you know, to understand what's happening. Now I want to know what's going on. And that can feel really quite intense. So yeah, I love that, Christina. Thank you. Means people work longer or don't take breaks due to feeling under scrutiny. Yeah, absolutely, Aurora. Great name, by the way. Because yeah, you're adding, these micromanagers are adding to the workload, right? They're demanding you to not only do the work, but also, you know, tell them how you're doing it and when and why, and yeah, all of that. So yeah. Can make them feel untrusted or lacking capability, lack of engagement. Yeah, brilliant. Decreased morale. People do not thrive. Huge turnover, huge impact on health and mental state. Yeah, absolutely. Increased stress and burnout. Harder. Makes it harder when they're not trusted. Fear of needing to be seen online at all times. Yeah. Builds distrust and unease between colleagues who have inconsistent experiences. Yeah, inconsistent. That's a great word. Yeah, having that kind of inconsistency can kind of really damage trust, I think. And we're going to be talking a bit about consistency in a moment. The less use of skills of the team, yeah, more effort having to be put in, yeah, reduced motivation. Yeah, absolutely, you've absolutely nailed it. There's also things like a reduced innovation. You know, you're not gonna feel inclined to bring up any new ideas because you're already feeling a bit overwhelmed, perhaps. Yeah, there might be more conflict because probably conflict is avoided until it becomes a big issue. And it can disrupt workflow. So you know what it feels like when you're in the flow and somebody then interrupts. And then there's kind of longer term consequences as well. So turnover, damaged reputation, loss of opportunities, you know, all of those kinds of things. So while micromanagement can offer short-term control, the hidden costs can be that it's detrimental to both the managers and the team's mental health, as well as morale, engagement, and productivity. So we need to recognise and address these hidden costs to create that healthy and high-performing work environment. We want it to be built on trust, autonomy, and collaboration, and all those other great words. So what I did a little while ago is I did some research into this, and I'll send, when I send you these slides and the recording of the webinar, I'll also include my research into you know, what's happening at the moment in terms of remote and hybrid and what we can do about it, because I interviewed and collaborated with 700 HR leaders about what's happening in businesses. So what I did from that research is I've created a framework, which we're going to talk about today, that includes all of the lovely touch points that you can see on screen at the moment. We're not going to look at them all today, but we're going to look at the empowering autonomy, collaborative connection, forward-thinking reflection, building trust, and pursuing clarity. And how you leaders can lead effectively and empower their team members whilst not being micromanaging. And if that's not a word, it should be. So let's have a look at that. So let's have a look at building trust, first of all, which is the foundation of empowerment. So let's have a look at some strategies to foster trust and psychological safety within your teams. So I'm going to whiz through a few tools that I use. And if anybody wants to have a chat with me, one-to-one, at a time of their choice, then let me know at the end. And I'd be happy to share these in a bit more depth. So what I do with any team that I start working with, whether it's as a project leader or because a company has asked me to, help teams to become more collaborative, is I tend to start with what's called a team canvas, and there's different variations on this, and I'll show you another one in a moment. But it's really good to kind of bring people together as a team and say, okay, what is it that we're doing? What are our goals? Why are we here? What values do we want as a team? So that's not just the business values, but what is it that we're doing? And the values of perhaps a people team might be different to a sales team, might be different to a marketing team. So thinking about, what our values, what we stand for, what are our principles, what are our personal goals, knowing what each other's personal goals are can be really useful. What are our expectations? What challenges are we expecting to have as a team? What are our development areas and our strengths and our assets? It's a really good way of kind of understanding how we're going to be working. And then another thing, another kind of slightly different interpretation of that is another variation of a team charter, where we can also talk about things like scope. So one of the things that's on here is scope. What will we work on? What won't we work on? And things like that. And you can also add in things like, how are we going to talk to each other? How are we going to escalate concerns? When would we go to our leader about something? What can we deal with ourselves? What can't we deal with ourselves? And you're kind of starting to build trust by doing that. And it's really important that it's done together. It's really important it's done collaboratively. And then you've got something to refer back to when people start to, deviate from that or start to display behaviours that perhaps aren't in line with that. So I do that at the beginning of projects, at the beginning of working with new teams, and we refresh it regularly. Something else that I do, and when you get these slides, you'll be able to plagiarize this to your heart's content. That's absolutely fine. I plagiarized it from somebody else, adapted it, made it my own. So this is a personal profile. You might have also heard of something like a manual of me or a read me. And this is something that I do as part of onboarding as well. And I have an onboarding playbook if people are interested in it. But it's a really good idea when you're getting to know your team to not only get to know them as people. It's always important to know what somebody's favourite book or film is. And if you want to tell me, then do so in the chat. I will judge. But also to find out things like, what do people find draining at work? What might people misunderstand about somebody? What gives me energy while I'm working? Because that's something that you can then refer back to, and it's all about building that trust, knowing your people and knowing what works for them and what doesn't. So I use this a lot, one-page profile, manual of me, those kinds of things. And it gives you an idea as a leader of a way to approach things with them. And it starts to build that psychological safety, which is really, really important in teams and reduces the compulsion, if you like, to micromanage. So let's have a look at empowering autonomy. So practical steps to delegate effectively, provide autonomy, and encourage accountability. So I don't know whether you recognise this in your businesses or in businesses that you have worked in before, but quite often things like objectives and goals and things like that are set quite siloed. So there may be a mission that's set by the business, and then all of the leaders go away and they work out what they're going to do with their teams, and they set those objectives, and off they go for the year. And And it means that when things are done in that kind of siloed way, it means that that silo then kind of continues through the teams. So you'll then have leaders that are setting individual KPIs. Then there's a kind of chaos of competing priorities. You know, marketing and sales might not be quite aligned. HR might not be aligned with the rest of the business. And what it means is that quite often, and put your hands up and let me know if your calendar looks like this, it means that you have a lot of communication and probably not of great value. So you can have the best of intentions where you want to keep a morning free, but then these meetings keep creeping in. And that's because leaders are just trying to, you know, trying to hit their objectives, trying not to fail, trying to please their managers, and being quite protective of their own teams. And again, that means that that's kind of conducive to that micromanagement style of behavior. So instead, another way of looking at it and thinking about it is by borrowing from one of the tools we use in Agile teams, which is Scrum. And that is about having backlogs, which we'll talk about, you know, planning and prioritizing, and then continually reflecting, improving, and you know, and measuring progress. So it's really important to kind of have a structure for a leader to follow, so that they can make sure that they're continually giving clarity and then providing the support that's needed. So it's about incorporating, you know, making sure that we're always doing work that will actually contribute to the mission success, achieving objectives, things are being done in an order that makes the most sense, and gives team members the opportunity to shape the direction and provides space and opportunity to reflect and improve, and also prioritises well-being by giving that clarity, reframing conflict, and identifying problems before they become issues. Now, I'm not going to dwell too much on this because I have got a separate webinar. And if you go onto my website, then there is a webinar that you can look at, which is all about OKRs, how they can be structured, and how they transform companies. So I'm not going to dwell too much on this. But the main point is OKRs, which are objectives and key results. They shouldn't be a meaningless, abstract objective. You've probably heard of SMART goals, and the principle of OKRs is the same, except that they're cross-functional objectives. So rather than it being broken down into different functions or departments, they're cross-functional, and the departments then feed into those objectives. So they're then used to shape team objectives, and they can be measured accordingly. So when you think about a team, you can look at you know, sort of two funnels, if you like. So you've got your cross-functional OKRs, which is the work that you're doing that will directly contribute to the company mission, and then you have your business as usual. And if you're in HR, which is what I've been in for all of my working life, then you'll know that business as usual never stops. There's always something to tackle. There's always something that pulls the rug from underneath you, and you know, it can often distract you. So it's really important to kind of track what's coming in, and then prioritize and then reprioritize regularly, to help you make sensible decisions. And that's one of the reasons that Agile teams work in sprints that are often sort of 1 to 2 weeks, so that we can focus during that time, and then we look up and we prioritize based on what's changed during that time. And we do that in lots of different ways. And the ones that I've pulled out here, you may have seen before, which is the Eisenhower matrix. You know, we look at what's important to the business, we look at what's urgent, and we make a decision about where and how we're going to tackle that. But another way that we do it is through the use of epics and backlogs. Now, epics they're relatively flexible in terms of what your business needs, but there's usually sort of 3 or 4 of them, and they will be your sort of main areas that you're going to be focusing on at that time. So you might have 3 business objectives, and that might be to prepare the company for sale, to become a world best company, or even a UK best company, if you want to keep it local, and to or to increase profits. Now, when you're looking at those epics on the right hand side, you'll see that probably quite a few of those could fit into any one of those objectives. By improving the employee experience, you're going to directly impact becoming a world best company, but also you're going to indirectly help towards contributing to increasing profits because less people will leave, for example. So you're making a cost saving there. So you can probably see that there are lots of different epics that can feed into the different objectives. But what we're looking for when we're planning is what will make the most impact to businesses. So we think about things like what will make the most value in the shortest space of time, the most value with the lowest effort. The most value is recognised by our end users, which in this case is our employees, or the most value with the lowest cost. So if we look at an example, so I'm going to have a look at absence, for example. So you can start to see the flow. And what this is doing is empowering team members to be part of decisions and part of shaping how the team is running, whilst also helping leaders that might have micromanagement to delegate, to have trust, whilst also being able to measure progress. So when we look at things like absence, if we decide that we're going to focus on this as an epic, we're going to reduce absence globally by 15%, we might think about what does that look like, where that's quite a big thing to do. So we might look at different perspectives, and these are called user stories. So we might think about, as an employee, I want to reduce my stress levels. As a leader, I want to encourage my team to talk to me before there are issues. Or as a HR team, we want to be able to track absences and spot trends to support employees more personally. So we know we want to do all of these things, but we need to decide where we're going to start. So we might decide that the one that will make the biggest impact is, as a leader, I want to encourage my team to talk to me before there are issues. So it means that we can start to reduce the absences while we then look at how we can track them. And quite often, in particular with HR teams, we look at things like how to track them before we look at how we can prevent them. So it's an interesting, different way of looking at it. So we might then do some prioritization activities. We might then look at the kinds of things that we want to do, like what are the top 10 reasons, having a focus group on best ways to encourage early intervention, include our employees in that, doing some training sessions, things like that. So these are all ideas. So this is our backlog. We're shaping our backlog. And then we might look at placing a value on each of those tasks, and the team can do this, and they can decide that value based on how long it's going to take, how quickly it can be rolled out, and what the impact will be. So then we look at that and we put them in some kind of order. And if anybody knows how I do that by playing planning poker, then again, have a chat with me afterwards and I'll be happy to share. So once we've got that, we've got that backlog prioritized, we can then start to encourage our team to pull those tasks towards themselves instead of having them pushed. And we do that by sharing and involving them in the decisions and what's going to happen next, and asking for their opinion and what have you. And it means that we can start, team members can start to pull those tasks to them. They know what needs to happen. They can start to take accountability themselves. They know the order in which it needs to be done. And we can start to move these tasks through progression. And what that often looks like is something called a Kanban, if you've heard of that. But it's basically a to-do, in progress and done. And it's just a really good way of being really transparent. which is something that can really benefit leaders that might be inclined to micromanage. So we remind ourselves of what the purpose is, which is that as a leader, I want to encourage my team to talk to me before there are any issues. We know what the tasks are. And by the way, I'm not saying that these are the right tasks for your business. I'm not saying these are the only tasks. This is just an example. We would have them all to do. We would then have people pull the tasks to themselves, and then transparently they will move them through the progress, so that the manager will know without having to check what the status is on each of the tasks. And it means that people can work together. It means that the leader can see if anything's not being started, and then probably really crucially, they'll be able to see if somebody's stuck. People can move a task into the I'm stuck, and it means that a leader can then say, hey, how can I help you? How can I unstick you? And a good way of doing that is, there are lots of different ones. Microsoft Planner, Trello. This is a Trello board. This is a real Trello board, which is why there's some gaps in there, because I've had to take out, names and stuff like that. But you can see that, we've got our to-do list is ongoing and regular tasks. You can see what's in progress. You can see where people have said, oh, I'm stuck, what do I do? But you can also see the backlog by the people that they were assigned to. So that means that, at any time of the day, anybody can look at that and go, oh, I think I can help this person here, or, oh, I'm a leader, I can help them unstick that. Or, oh, I can see this has become a bit more complicated than perhaps I was anticipating. So it's really good. It's great to have that kind of transparency for everybody. So then we look at some other tools that can help with that. So you may have heard of daily stand-ups, and the important thing with daily stand-ups is that they're time boxed, no more than 15 minutes, less if you have a team of less than 8. And the premise of daily stand-ups is that everything is okay unless it's stated otherwise. So you're not looking for people to tell you what they're doing, that you're not looking for people to moan about what they're doing, none of that. You're just asking them to say, yes, I'm doing well, everything's going as planned, unless I tell you otherwise. So you might want people to sort of like pick out something that they've achieved or something that they're going to work on that day. But it's a check-in and it's time boxed, but it's reinforcing that trust, because you're giving people the opportunity to tell you if something isn't right, without having to delve in. Another thing that's really useful and I found really transformative is the power of retrospectives. So it's really good to have this as part of that framework, to have this every couple of weeks or every month, depending on what your cycle is. And there are hundreds and hundreds of different ways of doing this. I've just put one on there, for example. But it's a great way for people to get together at the end of a couple of weeks, or at the end of a project, or at the end of a team, something that the team's working on, and say, okay, what went well, what didn't go so well, what behaviours were great and really helped us, what behaviours weren't so great and we're going to learn from moving into our next project. And that's a really good way of communicating things, without pointing fingers, without being personal. Instead, everything is pointing towards how can we improve and how can we be better as people, as a team, as a function, as a department moving forwards. So every time you do a retrospective, there'll be something that you're getting better at, and there will always be something to work on. So that's a really good way of using a team to reflect, rather than it always being down to the manager to highlight things. And then something that I'm really passionate about is continuous feedback, rather than sort of structured, monthly or worse, annual kind of appraisal type things, or one-to-ones where you're giving feedback. that can be quite damaging, I think, when that's not done effectively. And that's probably where people can feel quite micromanaged, because things are being stored to a point where, you know, everything's coming out all at once. So it's really important to think about ways in which feedback can be given continuously. And when I'm talking about feedback, I'm talking about, you know, celebrations, as well as you know, giving you know, ideas for development or areas for improvement. So there's lots and lots and lots of ways that you can do that, and I've put a few on there. You know, recognition platforms in the retrospectives, when somebody asks for it, that's always a good one. You know, when they've you know, when they've shared an insight, you know, so it's really good to kind of, you know, do it in the moment. And then what you can do is you can reframe more structured interventions like one-to-ones. You can adjust them based on people's personal preference or their need or their desire, you know, according to their profile, according to, you know, where they are in their journey with you. You know, you can use those interventions, things like career discussions or personal reflection, or to, you know, to help them to adjust based on your guidance, things like that. So that also helps with, you know, great strategy with reducing micromanagement. And then once you've done all of that, you then begin again. So it's that cycle of, you know, what's needed, involving the team in the planning, reflecting, giving opportunities for people to voice, you know, if they've got a problem or if they're stuck or they need support. You're continually giving feedback and guidance in the moment. And what you're doing is you're building a cycle and a framework and a kind of spine, if you like, for your team, so that they know what to expect. They know how they can get support. They know when you're likely to need to intervene, but you're making them part of it rather than something that you are doing to them. And what that means is that you're then starting to unleash team potential. You're going to start to reverse the kind of damage that micromanagement can do. And it's done, one of the ways that it's done is by solving that can't and won't dilemma. I don't know whether you've ever faced that. I know that I have before. You're kind of thinking, why are they not doing this? You know, is it because they can't, or is it because they won't? If you're giving people, you know, for example, somebody that constantly misses deadlines, is it because they have no respect for the deadline, or is it because they're struggling? You'll know that because you're giving them lots of opportunities to tell you. And you can then, you know, adjust your behavior accordingly. I won't go into the whole problem solving thing, but having things like retrospectives and planning, you know, involving people in planning, means that you're much more likely to be able to problem solve. And also I have got some tools as well where you can do that virtually too. So hopefully you've seen that that we've been you know, talking about all the different ways that you can become an empowering leader instead of a micromanaging leader. You know, you're leading with purpose. So it's not just for remote and hybrid, but for today's multi-generational workforce, you know, having, you know, that kind of inclusive form of leadership is how businesses are going to innovate, thrive and survive. So we're not just relying on incidental observations. We're providing a structure for people to thrive. We're creating spaces for thought. We're creating spaces for challenge, and you know, for reflection as well. So what we've touched on is reframing conflict. So, you know, by using things like retrospectives, where, you know, we're embracing the need for, you know, to challenge things and to embrace improvements. We've looked at self-organization or self-management because we're involving the teams. We've discovered a way of being able to measure progress transparently without having to rely on endless reports or endless meetings. And we've also encouraged collaboration and group autonomy and accountability as well. And by doing those things, we've started to look at relationship building. We're building some resilience as well, because we're looking at how we're challenging and how we're progressing as well. And really those kind of behaviors are in line with what today's employees need. When I was talking about that research earlier, we discovered that what people are looking for today, and this is across all generations, they're looking for inclusion. They want to be not only included because of their diversity and what they can bring to the team, but also their skills and their experience and their past and their cultures to be included in shaping the business. They're looking for autonomy and accountability, and that goes both ways. They want to be empowered to self-organise and be able to do things in a way that will bring out the best in themselves, and also to have their innovations or their ideas or creative solutions that can only come about by having a diverse team included in planning and in business missions as well. So we've touched on all of those things. If anybody wants to talk about that a little bit more, then I can show sort of like a little bit more about how I literally do that with my teams and how I actually shape the teams, although I've given you a bit of an overview. So I'll just end on how people efficient can help. So as I said before, we do project management, change transformation, org development, and improving people experience. We do that in lots of different ways. We've got our Agile in HR courses. We do psychological safety training, conflict management. But we also do lots of project work, so leading on change projects to move to remote first working, leading mergers where there needs to be harmonisation, streamlining and automating processes for busy leadership and HR teams, strategies for reducing micromanagement, org development projects, and people experience and product building as well. We also do, we have a course on building empowering leaders, and we can do that in-house, or we have open courses as well, although they're all sold out at the moment. And yeah, we just want to help. So I'll end with saying, in the spirit of that continuous feedback, that I would love to have your feedback. I'm going to put a link in the chat as well, and then I'm going to open up to any questions or any thoughts as well. So let me just pop that in the chat. Or you can hold up your phones if you're feeling really swanky and swish. You can hold up your phones to the QR code and you can do it that way. But I would love to have your feedback. And I already know that I've probably gone a bit too fast and I've spoken too much. So I already know that. But feel free to say that as well and confirm. But yes, so now I'll open up to any questions or any thoughts that people have. Just going to see if I can make this screen bigger because you're very small. So yeah, are there any questions, any thoughts, any challenges that people are facing at the moment? Oh, thank you, Heather. That I can help with? No questions here. Thanks, Katie. Great name.
Before you go, Kate, I was going to type it in the box, but it's taken me too long. I've done quite a bit of working with teams around OKRs and using, because I've worked in an Agile, I'm a product manager, so we use obviously OKRs, Scrum, Kanban, and what's really interesting is to see how you're using it in this context, and I think that's really great. Because I think what I would say, just the use of OKRs doesn't solve all of these problems, but I think the way in which you are framing it is really interesting. No, yeah, great. But that was just too much for me to type in the box.
Yeah, oh, thank you. No, you did the right thing. Well done. You were really efficient. No, you're absolutely right. Just having OKRs on their own will not transform a business. Absolutely not. And there's lots of things that go along OKRs. And I think, we touched a little bit on things like psychological safety and, really kind of building relationships between different functions or different departments in the business is really critical to making OKRs successful. But it is a good way. Sorry?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think possibly where the company that I was with perhaps didn't do it so well is that it really only sat in with the development and engineering side, and then didn't transfer over to sort of customer success, sales, HR, you know, all of those areas. So it wasn't, so that was, and there was definitely a lot of space for micromanagement that was still happening. But anyway, but I think looking at that, the way in which reframing how things like retrospectives can be used, brilliant.
Yeah. And it's so it sounds really daft, but since I've become since I've launched my own business, I'm obviously I obviously see a lot more businesses than I used to, just being in my own, and I'm still surprised now by how often departments or functions or whatever you want to call them are, you know, it's almost like they're set up to fail, because you'll have, for example, you know, you'll have an operations department that are challenged with an objective to, I don't know, you know, build more widgets because they want to be the #1 widget maker, and then finance will be given the objective of cutting costs. So you'll have two, you know, competing priorities where, you know, operations will be saying, right, well, in order to build more widgets, we need more machinery, we need more people, you know, and then you have finance saying, no, we can't make any more investment, or we need to cut corners here, or actually we need to do a recruitment, you know, a recruitment freeze. And then you'll have like the people team in the middle going, you know, how can we try and navigate a way of supporting both of these functions? And there'll be so much, oh, I was nearly going to swear then, but there'll be so much, you know, sort of hot air, you know, loads of meetings about it, you know, influencing backwards and forwards and side meetings and all of that kind of stuff. And you just think, oh my God, just make a decision and go for it. But, you know, it just wastes so much time. Whereas if you have that kind of, you know, cross-functional OKRs where all roads lead back to those 3 main objectives, then you're much more likely to build a team or teams that are working in partnership. But you're right, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your input. I really appreciate that. Any other questions or any other help that I can give? Otherwise, I might let you go. You don't have to hang around. You can go. You can enjoy the rest of your day. I will send out a recording. I will send out the slides. If anybody wants to contact me to talk individually, then please do. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for supporting this webinar, and yeah, spread the word. Link in with me on LinkedIn, Kate Madison Greenwell. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate. See you.
Bye.
Bye.